Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to show you how to simplify radicals. So first of all we should probably talk about what a radical even is. So a radical is any term with a root. So for example, we're mainly going to be dealing with square roots in this case, but a radical could also include things like a cube root or a fourth root and so on and so forth. But again, we're mainly dealing with square roots. So let's take a look at two different kinds of radicals you're going to see. So we have something like this, the square root of 48. And the square root of 48, that kind of radical has a specific kind of name. It's called an entire radical. Okay, so an entire radical you're just going to look at and it's just going to be shown as the square root of some number. So square root of some number is just given as an entire radical. Okay, but then we have another kind of radical. Okay, so if we have something like 2 times the square root of 3, so 2 root 3 means 2 times the square root of 3, that's a mixed radical because we have a whole number out front and then we're multiplying that by, well, by an entire radical, right? We're multiplying that by the square root of 3 in this case. So when you have like a coefficient, and like in this case we have 2 as our coefficient, that's a mixed radical. So an entire radical has a coefficient of 1 technically, right? You don't have to write the coefficient, but it's got a coefficient of 1. And a mixed radical has a coefficient which is not 1. Okay? So let's take a look at how to simplify radicals. Well, what does it even mean to simplify radicals? Well, simplifying radicals means when you have an entire radical and you're going to change it into a mixed radical. Okay, so there's actually a way to change between the two different forms. All right, so simplifying means taking an entire radical, turning it into a mixed radical. So how do we do that then? Let's see. So we're going to need a rule. Okay, and here's the rule. All right, so the rule is, let's say we have a radical like the square root of a. So the square root of a is just a number here, right? So square root of a, that's an entire radical. Okay, and let's say we take the square root of a and we're going to multiply that by the square root of b. Okay, well if we take the square root of a, multiply it by the square root of b, the rule is that simplifies to, or that can be written as rather, the square root of a times b. So, for example, if we have the square root of 2 and we're multiplying that by the square root of 3, right, well 2 times 3 is 6, so that's going to be the same as the square root of 6. You can actually double check that with your calculator. You could do the square root of 2 times the square root of 3, right, and then do the square root of 6 and you're going to see you're getting the same number. Okay, so using this rule, we're going to talk about how to simplify radicals, which again means turning from an entire radical into a mixed radical. So let's take a look here. So let's say I want to simplify the square root of 48, which is the entire radical from the first page. Okay, so here's the first question we're going to ask ourselves. What is the largest perfect square that divides 48? Okay, so remember, a perfect square is any number that's written as something squared. So the first few perfect squares are 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, because those are 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, and 5 squared, and we can keep going if we want to, all right? But we're looking for the largest perfect square that divides 48. Well, the answer to that is 16, because 16 times 3 is 48. Okay, so 16 is the largest perfect square that divides 48. So knowing that 16 times 3 is equal to 48, and that 16 is a perfect square, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the square root of 48 and we're going to write it as the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. So what we just did is we used our rule from the first page backwards, right? So if you did root of 16 times root of 3, we know that according to that rule, that would be the root of 16 times 3, which is root of 48, right? So we're taking the square root of 48 and we're writing it as the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. And this is why we needed that one number to be a perfect square. We wanted 16 to be a perfect square, okay? Because the square root of a perfect square is always a nice number, okay? So the square root of 16 in this case is 4. It gives us a nice number. So we can simplify this even further by saying that we get 4 times the square root of 3. And 4 times the square root of 3, right? Well, that's just saying 4 root 3, okay? So we took the square root of 48 and wrote it as a mixed radical, 4 root 3, okay, by asking ourselves what's the largest perfect square that divides 48? It was 16. Right, so we know that 16 times 3 is 48. So we take the square root of 48 and we write it as the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. Square root of 16 is 4, so that gives us 4 root 3. So this is how to simplify radicals. Take care.